The problem with this nonsense, very much so, one of the biggest reasons I have a problem with it, one of the biggest reasons I'm ranting about it on the internet, if you will, is the fact of the matter is if you are selecting for values, you are neglecting, for one thing, you're committing a contradiction, because if you're so inclusive of diverse viewpoints, but you're immediately selecting for someone who only has a particular point of view and particular values, you're immediately in violation of your own promise to be inclusive of diverse viewpoints. Alrighty. Hello, folks. I hope you're doing well. There's something I wanted to talk about and to make the point, because if you've been on this channel long enough, I keep harping on it, but it matters. DEI statements are ideological litmus tests in applications for hiring, in job applications, and what have you. They have no place there. They certainly have no place in academia. They have no place in science. They do not belong. They're antithetical to the idea of diversity. I've said this a few times because, I said this on the other video about the Fred Hutchinson Center's note here, that, they're the work of the post-millennial and what have you, getting hold of those documents. The thing about it is that how the hell can you tell me you are for diversity if you are selecting for only one worldview? A, and B, you're encouraging a lot of liars and flatterers to go into something to begin with. But the other thing is just like you are selecting for a single worldview if you're going with a DEI statement at this point, which is antithetical to viewpoint diversity. It is antithetical to the principle of universalism in science, and it just drives me batty. So it's why it keeps coming up, and why it will keep coming up. This particular article comes to us from Real Clear Education. Help wanted, only the woke need apply, from Richard Lowry, writing for Real Clear Education. And I want to use this as a jumping off point to illustrate something from a thread on Twitter. And I honestly, I hate to have to talk about it because it's just disgusting to me to see this happen. And it's like, I will not put up with it showing up in academia. It's already in academia, let's just say that. But yeah, I'm not gonna be putting up with it quietly, let's put it that way. But first off, a few of you have asked where the Rogue Journal Club has been. We had to take a brief break because we had some scheduling snafus, as it were. But we are back with quite an interesting article on community science, and we got into a bit of a philosophical discussion. So this is available now on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and the video version will come out sometime next week on YouTube for those of you who are YouTube followers. So I encourage you to check it out because it's going to be a blast. Don't worry, we'll be returning to a regular schedule. We just had a minor scheduling snafu with filming the third one. So yeah, there you go. So like I said, you can listen on Spotify, you can listen on Amazon Music, and I also know it is on Google Podcasts and Apple Podcasts too. So go check it out. I'll link it in the description for you. Back to this article. By Richard Lowry, August 9th, 2022. After hypocritically ranting about the threat to academic freedom posed by Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick's higher education reform proposals, the faculty and administration at the University of Texas, Austin, appear poised to end the remaining vestiges of free expression and free inquiry at our institution. Okay, so this guy is at that institution. I have not looked at his material where he's from. The university's diversity, equity, inclusion, DEI policy, which already requires that those seeking hiring and promotion demonstrate political commitment to critical race theory and radical gender ideologies, will now be sharpened, whatever the heck that means, apparently to include mandatory diversity statements from job applicants. Such statements require every job applicant to discuss his work to increase diversity, equity, inclusion in his professional life. These are explicit political tests, as has been made clear by their use in the University of California system, where only those candidates whose statements pass muster with the DEI commissars, and this is his opinion, though I don't. Well, this is certainly his opinion here, and I already told you mine on what I think of DEI statements, so you might be able to guess where I line up on this. DEI commissars can be considered by departments for hiring. Lest one think at a university in Texas would not. Lest one think at a. Lest one think, excuse me, that a university in Texas would not go this far. Texas A&M considers the Berkeley approach a recommended resource for implementing DEI policies. Thus, Texas is well on its way to implementing a ban on hiring those with even moderately conservative views to teach in public universities. In other words, no conservatives need apply in Texas. Only those faculty who support DEI policies, policies mandated by DEI in admission and hiring will be considered for employment or promotion. Decades ago, Texas fought hard to free our state from state-sanctioned racism, but our universities appear determined to bring it back. So, they're okay. The thing about Lieutenant Governor Patrick's thing is, yeah, I am concerned whenever any government official interferes with academic freedom. That is a concern that I have. I'm also just as concerned. Those two things can be mutually. You can be concerned about direct interference from government officials in academic freedom and free speech. Yes, you can. You can also be very concerned about it coming through DEI statements and mandating specific values be what is required to get a job at a university, which is supposed to be. Oh, let me guess. The university is supposed to be about free speech, freedom of thought, pursuing the truth. And science itself is supposed to be about pursuing the truth, and given that a lot of our science is done at universities, if the university itself is not about pursuing the truth, then this is kind of a problem if you're working as a scientist at one sometimes. Universities need bold thinkers who will fight stultifying orthodoxy that has taken over campuses around the country. Forcing people to pay obeisance to leftist activities simply eliminates any hope for recovering our institutions. Even in the sciences, grants and promotions are increasingly given on the basis of having the right politics. Texas leaders on the boards of regents and in this legislature must fight to restore free inquiry and integrity to public universities. They must have the courage to stand up to radicals who have taken over and are driving out any dissenting voices. It is time to drop meaningless and counterproductive measures and to back the true principles of academic freedom. Stopping DEI requirements is a first step in this process. In Texas colleges and universities, we must be free to teach, even if we're not woke. Okay. And I give this professor a lot of credit. Associate Professor of Finance at the University of Texas, Austin. So he's, coming out and scorching his own university here, which will be certainly interesting in his case. But I don't disagree that it's a bad thing to have. You already heard my opinion in what I say with this, and I really, really think it's a bad idea to have a values-based litmus test on a position where your job is the pursuit of the truth in particular. So, I find DEI statements to be freakishly bad. Unfortunately, University of Texas, Austin is certainly not the only one, and I think he said in here, I was like, Texas universities. Yeah, Texas universities and all this kind of stuff. You think it can't happen there. No, that's not what's about the problem here. So if you're not following John Saylor online, he's a National Academies scholar, and has created a wonderful thread here that actually shows the many DEI rubrics he's come across thus far for universities, and I'm sure John has been adding to his list here, but they are very, very scary to see as many universities, because this is not a short thread, this is a long thread, right? So, this is University of California, Berkeley, which is kind of considered the standard. So, like, Texas A&M thinks this to be a great standard. It describes in depth, consistent track record, organized or spoken at workshops or other events, and aimed at increasing understanding of DEI and belonging as one aspect of the track record. Having very specific activities, but this is what you're being graded on to get a job in chemistry or in physics at UC Berkeley. things like that in here. So, identifies, clearly formulates new idea, convincingly expresses intent to be a strong advocate for diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging within department, school, college field. What if you just want to do research and mentor students? This is why you get problems with these things, you know? So that's UC Berkeley. Oh yeah, University of Colorado, Denver. Discusses equity, diversity, equity, inclusion as core values every individual should actively contribute to advancing. This is a requirement at University of Colorado, Denver. Yeah, no, selecting for values is antithetical to diversity. You are selecting for values. Texas Tech University, Department of Biological Sciences. Clear and detailed ideas for advancing equity and inclusion at Texas Tech and within their field through their research, teaching, and service. A level of proposed involvement appropriate for career level. New tenure track member would be expected to have more department, campus-wide, and national impact, including leadership. And oh yeah, and it's plans for advancing diversity, equity, inclusion at Texas Tech University. Emory University. Yeah, I covered this one actually on the video about DEI rubrics, so you might go back to that video if you want that one. But UNL, University of Nebraska Lincoln, here rubric for their DEI statements. How do they grade you, right? Hang on a second here. There. Well, that didn't quite work as I was hoping it would. I just noticed that the image is cut off, so one moment as we adjust. Live adjusting. Sorry. Okay. We are live adjusting the feed. There we go. There we go. But diversity, equity, and inclusion statement, extended rubric here. Yeah. Exceptionally or clearly addressed. Identifies and discusses many intersectional acts. Uses sensitive language. Demonstrates comfort when describing diversity issues. Discusses inclusion as an active process. Oh, goodness. Discusses challenges created by inequality, right? The more to it. Here. Adapted. Oh, yeah. Demonstrates attention to diversity, inclusion, in teaching practices. Demonstrates attention to diversity, inclusion in mentoring activities. In research and mentoring activities. This is a mess. Let's see. Plans or contextual involvement with the creation. Describes specific plans. So, in other words, they want somebody who's already an activist coming to these things. So that's Nebraska Lincoln. Western Oregon University here. Candidate provide at least one strategy for contributing to advancing racial equity and eliminating systemic racism. Cornell University here. Several items on here. Understands and is knowledgeable of, sophisticated, familiar with demographic data and higher education. Yeah, significant direct experience advancing diversity, equity, inclusion through research and service and teaching. Examples may include advising an organization. Okay. Week details plans to promote diversity, equity, inclusion through research, teaching as service at Cornell and within their department and or campus-wide. References ongoing efforts at Cornell to improve and modify them to advance diversity, equity, inclusion. That is Cornell. University of Virginia. Here, mentoring activities, service activities. As the candidate mentored student groups, postdocs, staff from different from their own and or groups. Okay. Yeah, more than that, research and teaching activities. Goodness. Yeah. Bowling Green University, Kentucky. Knowledge, awareness, application, lacking evidence, optimal evidence, describes multiple activities in depth, clear awareness of, clear knowledge of, experience with, and interest in dimensions of diversity that result from background experience, diverse ideologies, perspectives. If you just stopped at diverse ideologies, that would be great. That would be great if you just stopped there, but fine. Let's see. University of Michigan. Here, understanding DEI in higher education. Criteria. Research. One. Current or planned research relevant to... Research focuses on underserved populations. Research addresses issues relevant to DEI. Oh boy. And it is really an overt litmus test. So this thread is quite long, but it is quite well worth reading. So Indiana University School of Medicine, UNC School of Medicine, which was earlier in the week. Let's see. Last few months, I've released case studies on higher ed in Texas, Utah, and Arizona. Found universities that promise to create DEI requirements for promotion and tenure. I'm going to take a wager there might be in a few other states that most people wouldn't think of, like such blood red states as, I don't know, Florida, perhaps, probably. I bet you there's some in Florida. But yeah, assessing faculty values and mandating their adherence to the politically coded concepts is a pretty straightforward violation of academic freedom. In many cases, it will tilt the scale in favor of terrible research and advocacy. And this is actually where I want to end, right here, because the problem with this nonsense, very much so, one of the biggest reasons I have a problem with it, one of the biggest reasons I'm ranting about it on the internet, if you will, is the fact of the matter is, if you are selecting for values, you are neglecting, for one thing, you're committing a contradiction, because if you're so inclusive of diverse viewpoints, but you're immediately selecting for someone who only has a particular point of view and particular values, you're immediately in violation of your own promise to be inclusive of diverse viewpoints. It is an utter contradiction. The other thing I'm going to say with this is that, I've said this before, I'll say it again. Universities are the training ground for the next generation of scientists. The problem with teaching that you can only have one set of values then is that you then make people afraid to push the bounds a little bit, to explore what the truth is, to ask questions. It's not good at all for viewpoint diversity. It is not good at all for universalism. And overall, with stuff like this, it will not be good for science. It will not be good for STEM in the slightest to disallow certain values. And this is a way to do it, to say you only want people with certain values. You are disallowing values and chasing away brilliant scientists or brilliant potential scientists who are students now. And it's just going to be an absolute nightmare when you can't have multiple perspectives in your pursuit for the truth. And it likely will lead to some, as John says himself, I agree with the sentiment, that it likely will cause some very terrible research to be produced in the future. And I immediately think I did the video the other few months ago on QuantCrit, the researchers who are just openly assuming that any disparity they find in their research is because of systemic discrimination or what have you, rather than actually being willing to probe that and figure it out. That's an example of what will be terrible research and terribly done research. But such is at this point. But these DEI statements do not help. And I certainly hope, I haven't checked, I want to see the University of Austin and what they're going to do. But I hope very much so that the University of Austin throws the DEI statement nonsense out the window and says no more to this crap. Because that's what it is. DEI statements are ideological litmus tests, ideological bullcrap. A little hot temper for me, but anyway, that's it. Let me know what you think. Hit the like button on the way out the door if you like this video. Comment on the video, share the video, subscribe to the channel, all that lovely good jazz. And until next time, I'm Adrian, and I hope you all stay curious, everybody.